Everything changed for me because of Jesus, Caroline, Elon Musk said, leaning forward with quiet intensity. His gaze pierced through the space between them, catching the young press secretary off guard. Not religion, not some vague spirituality, and certainly not the institution of church. I'm talking about Jesus himself. Caroline Levitt gave a slow nod, doing her best to preserve a veneer of professionalism despite the unexpected turn their conversation had taken. The recorder resting between them clicked softly, capturing each word as the world's most enigmatic billionaire ventured into territory few expected him to explore. My life has been about trying to safeguard humanity's future through innovation, Elon continued, his tone gentler now. Electric cars, renewable energy, interplanetary travel, all attempts to protect civilization. But I realized I was neglecting something essential. Which is? Caroline asked, her curiosity now overriding her initial surprise. The human soul, he answered simply. Jesus once said, "What does it profit a man to gain the whole world and lose his soul?" I've helped humanity grasp the world, yet I was blind to what truly gives life its value. Caroline studied the figure seated across from her. This wasn't the Elon Musk the world had grown accustomed to, the daring entrepreneur, the erratic social media voice, the relentless visionary. There was something undeniably different in his demeanor. When did this shift begin for you? She asked with care. About half a year ago. I was alone in my library reading the Gospel of Mark, not for spiritual reasons, but out of historical interest. Then I read the words, "I am the way, the truth, and the life." Those words struck me in a way nothing else ever has. He paused, searching for the right phrasing. I've spent my life chasing truth through science and logic, and then I was confronted with a person claiming not merely to teach the truth, but to be truth itself. That's quite a bold assertion, Caroline noted. The boldest ever made, Elon affirmed. And it forced a choice, either it's true or it's not. No gray area. Jesus was either who he said he was, or he was deluded or deceitful. But he couldn't be merely a wise moral teacher. His eyes lit up with intensity. I approached it like I approach any hypothesis, with analysis. I examined the historical accounts, the coherence of the gospel narratives, and the enduring impact of his teachings across generations and cultures. And what did you determine? Caroline asked, now completely drawn in. That Jesus of Nazareth is precisely who he claimed to be, God in human form, sent to restore our broken connection with the divine through his own sacrifice, he said, his voice resolute. It's not the answer I set out to find, but it's the only one that fits the data. A chill crept down Caroline's spine. Whatever had happened to Elon Musk was not superficial. It was seismic. Do you understand what this might mean for your public identity? She asked. The reaction from investors, media, the scientific world? I do, he said quietly, but I've come to care more about what's true than about how I'm perceived. Jesus said, "You shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free." That's exactly what I've experienced. He leaned forward again, his voice low and fervent. Caroline, Jesus spoke of life in abundance, a life filled with purpose, deep meaning, and real love. Not a life defined by accolades or assets, but by communion with God and serving others. That's what I've discovered, and it's revolutionized everything. Caroline nodded, maintaining composure though her heart was stirring. She had carried her own quiet questions about faith for years, and now this unexpected testimony was awakening something within. There's more, Elon said, his tone shifting as though he were unveiling something sacred. Something that happened just last week, something that made all of this even more undeniable. He turned to gaze out the window where golden sunlight painted long shadows across the floor. Then he faced her again, his voice hushed. Last Wednesday, I visited a pediatric clinic in Savannah. No press, no media presence, I needed it to be personal. I met a boy named Anthony, 10 years old, battling a fierce form of leukemia, Elon said, his voice catching. This kid was extraordinary, so alive, despite everything he was facing. His room was covered in drawings of rockets. When I walked in, he didn't care that I was Elon Musk. He just asked if I wanted to see his sketches. Caroline noticed the sheen in Elon's eyes. He handed me a notebook full of rocket designs, astonishing creativity. Then he looked at me with this piercing seriousness and asked, "Mr. Musk, do you know Jesus?" Just like that. No pretense. Elon chuckled softly at the memory. I told him I was just starting to. And he said, "He's been my best friend since I was 4. He stays with me during the hard parts." Caroline felt a lump rising in her throat. Asterisk. Then Anthony asked if he could pray for me. I came there thinking I'd encourage him. And instead, he reached out to bless me. Elon shook his head, still amazed. He took my hand and prayed with a sincerity I've never encountered. Not scripted, not religious jargon. just speaking to Jesus like he was standing right there beside us. Elon's voice faltered slightly. When Anthony finished praying, he looked up at me and said, Jesus wanted me to tell you not to be afraid anymore. He has extraordinary plans for you. A pause filled the space between them, the weight of the words settling in the quiet. Then Elon spoke again, more softly. There was no way that child could have known about the fears I've buried deep. Fear of not doing enough for the world, of failing the future, of my life not amounting to anything meaningful. But somehow, he spoke straight to the heart of those fears. What happened after that? Caroline asked, her voice gentle. I asked him how he keeps such a hopeful spirit despite everything he's enduring. What he said left me speechless. Jesus never said life would be easy. He just promised he'd go through it with us. The simplicity of that wisdom. It hit me harder than any lecture or book ever has. Elon fixed his gaze on her. That's when it all came into focus. Months of investigation, studying scripture, analyzing historical context. It all pointed to something real. But that boy didn't just help me believe Jesus existed. He helped me realize that Jesus is here. Now, what do you mean by that? Caroline asked, leaning forward. That he can be known, truly known, not just studied or admired from afar. Elon said, his expression sincere. In the Western world, we've been conditioned to equate knowledge with facts and theories. But the Hebrew worldview from which Jesus spoke understood knowing as something lived and embodied. It's not just cerebral. It's relational, experiential. Caroline scribbled notes, absorbing the depth of his words. Here's where people often misunderstand Jesus. Elon continued, now more animated. He didn't come to launch an institution or create a religious club. He came to mend what was broken, to restore intimacy between humanity and the divine, to heal relationships between people, and even to realign our role as caretakers of the earth. So you believe this has implications beyond personal spirituality? Caroline asked, eyebrows raised. Absolutely transformative implications. Elon nodded. If we lived out his teachings, to love God wholeheartedly and to love others as ourselves, our entire civilization would be reshaped. It would touch everything. Justice systems, economics, environmental ethics, technological development. His voice deepened with conviction. Picture a society where compassion overrides competition, where people matter more than margins, where integrity outranks influence, and where the weak are sheltered, not discarded. That's the vision Jesus called the kingdom of heaven. Caroline felt herself pulled in, not just as a journalist chasing a headline, but as a person hearing something that resonated with the quiet questions of her own heart. Caroline, I'm convinced that Jesus offers the one path forward this world so urgently needs, not just on a personal level, but as a global society. Technology can enhance life, but it cannot supply meaning or purpose. He reclined slightly in his seat. Don't misunderstand, I still believe in progress. I'm still investing in renewable energy, deep space ventures, safe AI. But now I view those things as instruments of stewardship, not salvation. That's a substantial change in worldview, Caroline observed. It's the most important shift I've ever experienced. Elon agreed. And it's why I feel compelled to speak publicly, despite the risks involved. Caroline adjusted in her chair, trying to process the gravity of everything she just heard. What sort of consequences are you anticipating? A range, Elon said after a moment. Market fluctuations, media backlash, possible tensions with stakeholders. It's not exactly fashionable for someone in my position to express conviction in the teachings of Jesus. He gave a half smile. We live in a paradoxical culture, one that embraces spirituality in vague terms but recoils when confronted with specific, transformative claims, especially those that Jesus made. Why do you think his message creates such discomfort? Caroline asked, genuinely engaged. Because Jesus leaves no room for neutrality, Elon said. He demands a response. He said, whoever is not with me is against me. That kind of statement doesn't sit well in a society that idolizes ambiguity and self-definition. Caroline nodded slowly, feeling the conversation had taken on a depth she hadn't anticipated. But there's more, Elon said, his voice tightening with gravity. Something happened just yesterday that disturbed me more than the risk of media fallout or a dip in Tesla stock. He glanced at his phone, then turned its screen down on the table. I received a call from a senior official in the Canadian Ministry of Innovation, someone I've collaborated with on space and energy initiatives. They expressed unease over my recent remarks about faith. That's unexpected, Caroline said, her instincts sharpening. It went beyond concern, Elon said quietly. The message was subtle but unmistakable. They implied that if I continued to speak openly about my beliefs, certain regulatory paths could become less smooth. Caroline sat straighter. They actually implied that your faith could jeopardize government cooperation? Not in direct language, of course, Elon said with a hint of irony. But the subtext couldn't have been clearer: keep your spiritual views private or face potential fallout. His expression darkened slightly. That kind of veiled pressure, especially coming from a democratic institution, is deeply troubling. It strikes at the heart of what freedom of conscience is supposed to mean. Which is why you came to me? Caroline asked, surprised. Yes, Elon replied. You have a track record of integrity, of speaking the truth regardless of whose politics it threatens. And given your background as a former federal press secretary, your voice carries a kind of balance and credibility that few others possess. Elon's gaze was steady and grave. I believe we're witnessing a deeper shift in how religious expression is handled in this country, particularly when that expression challenges dominant cultural narratives. And I'm not the only one receiving subtle warnings. Caroline felt the heaviness in his words, sensing that the story before her might be far more consequential than she initially realized. What exactly did you say about Jesus that stirred this reaction? She asked. In a recent conversation, I referenced Jesus' teaching about giving to Caesar what is Caesar's and to God what is God's, Elon said. I pointed out that it's the clearest articulation we have of how faith and government should relate. Civil authorities have a rightful domain, but they don't own our hearts, our convictions, or our eternal souls. I added that Christ's message about human dignity and freedom stands as a vital counterweight to the expanding power of governments and corporations over personal life. And that triggered the response? Yes, within hours, Elon said, his face composed but marked with concern. That kind of speed suggests surveillance and a level of unease that should trouble anyone who believes in the freedom of conscience enshrined in our Constitution. He met Caroline's eyes squarely. And the official who called me mentioned you by name. Said they were aware you were arranging this interview and wanted to flag that such conversations could be misinterpreted by certain regulatory agencies. A chill ran through Caroline. How would they even know about this interview? I've only spoken with my editor. That's exactly the question I've been asking myself, Elon replied quietly. And it fits into a broader pattern that I'm only beginning to see clearly. A heavy silence followed as Caroline tried to comprehend the magnitude of what she was hearing. What began as a feature profile had morphed into something far more complex and potentially dangerous. So, what do you plan to do? She finally asked. Speak the truth, come what may, Elon said without hesitation. Jesus warned, do not fear those who can kill the body but cannot kill the soul. If he could face the cross for the sake of truth, then I can endure a few bureaucratic headaches and some public ridicule. His features softened slightly. But there's more. I want to share something Jesus said that's profoundly reshaped how I see my responsibility in this world. From his coat pocket, Elon drew a small, worn Bible. Its edges were frayed, the margins brimming with scribbles, tabs jutting out like bookmarks of discovery. It was clearly no token, it had been lived with. There's a passage in Matthew chapter 5, he said, flipping gently to a marked page. Jesus tells his disciples, you are the light of the world. Not just people of virtue, but light. A source of illumination in darkness. He looked directly at Caroline. Then he adds, a city set on a hill cannot be hidden. No one lights a lamp and places it under a bowl. Instead, it's set on a stand and it gives light to everyone in the house. Closing the book, Elon held it reverently in his hands. That line has been echoing in my mind for weeks. If I've found something true, something this transformative, then what right do I have to conceal it? Especially when I've been given such a visible platform. So this is your reason for going public now? Caroline asked. Partly, Elon nodded. But it's also something deeper. He hesitated for a moment, then went on. Last night, I had a dream unlike any I've had before. I don't usually remember them. But this one was vivid, unforgettable. Caroline noticed the shift in his voice. Gentler, almost fragile. I dreamt I was standing in the presence of Jesus, he said. He didn't speak a word. just looked at me with eyes that radiated pure love and unwavering truth. Then he revealed my life, everything I've done, every company, every invention, every mistake, unfolding like a panoramic timeline. His voice dropped to a near whisper, and one by one, all those accomplishments faded away, until only one question remained, burning in the air between us. What did you do with the truth you were given? He turned his gaze to Caroline. When I woke up, I knew. My whole life, I've prized truth over popularity, reason over ritual. I've challenged dogma when the evidence demanded it. And now, I'm faced with the most consequential truth I've ever encountered. That Jesus is exactly who he said he is. That his way holds the remedy for our most profound human crises. And I have to decide what I'll do with that truth. Caroline could see the emotion behind his carefully measured voice. The walls had dropped, revealing someone transformed. So what's your decision? She asked. To live it, to proclaim it, and to accept whatever consequences may come, he replied firmly. Yesterday, I finalized the launch of a foundation committed to applying Jesus' core teachings to today's most urgent global problems. Poverty, warfare, ecological collapse, and the ethics of emerging technologies. That's a major undertaking, Caroline noted, her pen flying across her notepad. I've pledged $5 billion to start, Elon continued, not to build churches or fund denominations, but to prove, practically, that when you apply Christ's principles of love, integrity, compassion, and justice, entire systems and communities can be redeemed. Caroline glanced up, her expression thoughtful. Some people are going to say you've lost your mind. Others will say this is a calculated PR move. I expect both reactions, Elon said calmly. They said the same of Jesus, called him mad, accused him of hidden agendas. But truth rarely arrives without resistance. He leaned in slightly, his voice firm yet tender. What I've come to understand, Caroline, is this. The way of Jesus isn't merely about personal redemption or a promise of heaven in some distant afterlife. It's about ushering the values of heaven, love, justice, mercy, and truth into the here and now. It's about renewal beginning today, both within us and around us. And do you believe technology plays a role in that renewal? Caroline asked, well aware of the weight his words carried, given his background. Technology is a vessel, Elon replied thoughtfully. It carries the potential for extraordinary good or devastating harm. The real issue is, whose values steer its creation and use? Jesus taught that we are to love others as we love ourselves. Now imagine what it would look like if artificial intelligence, sustainable energy, medicine, and biotechnology were all shaped by that ethic. His eyes lit up with that unmistakable intensity, brilliant, fervent. The danger isn't the tool. It's allowing tools of immense power to be developed in a moral vacuum. Jesus offers the ethical framework we've been lacking, one that prioritizes reverence for the divine and sacrificial love for humanity. Caroline caught the glint of tears beginning to well in his eyes, something she never expected to witness from the notoriously composed visionary. 2 days ago, he said, voice catching ever so slightly, I visited the resting place of my infant son. He died many years ago, and it's a grief I've carried in silence, buried beneath layers of distraction, work, ambition. He paused, his expression vulnerable, the air around them thick with quiet. As I stood there, something happened, something I can't articulate fully. Presence enveloped me, gentle, real, undeniable. He drew a steadying breath. For the first time since losing him, I didn't just feel resignation. I felt peace, true peace. And then, these words entered my mind, clear and unmistakable. He is in my care until you are reunited. A single tear traced its way down his cheek. He didn't brush it away. In that moment, he said, his voice low but resolute, everything Jesus ever said about being the resurrection and the life ceased to be abstract theology. It became something I could hold on to, my anchor in the storm.